Welcome again, everyone, to our exciting webinar today. In terms of the agenda, what we plan to cover here, we want to definitely provide an introduction to results positive or new for anyone. Also, then we'll jump in and highlight some of the new capabilities with Washington, D.C. As we're doing that, I'll also provide some best practices in each one of these topic areas. So it'll be a combination of best practices as well as what's new. At the end, we'll kind of highlight some implementation best practices, reporting solutions, and then as Sean mentioned, we'll open it up for question and answers. So thanks again for joining our webinar today. Results Positive has been helping organizations over the last almost 20 years now, helping them be able to optimize the results associated with their technology investments, specifically around strategic portfolio management, which is a core focus of our discussion today, as well as project portfolio management, and then service management as well. So we assist organizations on their service management needs there, whether it be customer service management or IT service management. And then analytics and reporting, definitely something that differentiates us. Building upon our app development capabilities, we have some solutions that we can highlight for you that really provide end-to-end stakeholder visibility. So definitely want to make sure you're here at the end of the webinar to understand those capabilities. So thanks again for joining today. So first of all, I'd like to talk about strategic portfolio management, some of the traditional hybrid modes. We're going to be talking a little bit today about the enterprise agile planning, more for organizations that primarily started adopting various portions of the SAFe framework, or organizations that want to use a variation thereof. So from a traditional SPM approach perspective, this is kind of the traditional approach. When I mean traditional, it's kind of referring to things from a traditional waterfall perspective. And this kind of gives kind of a high level view of that traditional approach using ServiceNow. So typically you start off here with enterprise and business unit strategic plans and associated strategies and goals. Then you'd be able to start performing your strategic planning, then do your portfolio program management here, and then be able to kind of manage that demand intake process and the project management process. We're going to talk a little bit about the whole idea of top-down strategic planning versus bottom-up planning. We are seeing with basically all of our healthcare organizations, they do a very good job of putting together a strategic plan, their overall strategic priorities, areas of focus, as well as in their associated goals. And so we're seeing that as a great opportunity for organizations, even outside of IT, when they look at enterprise PMO or just looking at overall strategic planning capabilities. But then what we're highlighting here is kind of more of the bottom up, where you can allow the organization to submit their particular demands or proposed projects. Those can go through a business validation process there, any governance that you need to get that reviewed and approved based on the financial commitments, resource commitments, benefits, risks, and prioritization. And then from there, you would go into an execution methodology here from a project perspective, and then you would start managing that project. The one thing to highlight here over on the right-hand side is ServiceNow allows you to do waterfall, hybrid, or agile, and we're going to highlight some of the enterprise agile planning capabilities that were just recently released. So just wanted to give you kind of a picture from a traditional strategic portfolio management approach from ServiceNow. We're seeing a lot of our organizations really starting to adopt hybrid project execution. And so it's kind of mirroring the waterfall approach with the actual agile approach. So kind of depicted by this image here, where you've got some traditional planning up front, got your project charter, documenting requirements. There again, that could be backlog from an overall agile perspective. And then typically they're looking at getting some budget and resource approvals. And the reason for hybrid project execution approach here is that many organizations, their executives are still looking for the traditional ways of monitoring and approving their investments, i.e. then they wanting to have a full financial budget, business case, resource view into that. And so you're going to have that kind of upfront traditional waterfall type planning. Then from there, you go into your executing. You might have multiple sprints. That way their team can go off and do multiple sprints. Also, if you're doing hybrid, you could have other teams that aren't doing agile and they could do more task-based work, but then allows for the agile. And then you might have some additional kind of more traditional activities and closing out the project, might be preparing for transition to operations, release management, might be doing some of your overall lessons learned or project closeout. And then the key thing here we're seeing is project status reporting. So organizations that have executives that are still looking to have things reported in the traditional fashion, then you can report that in traditional fashion, but then allow the teams to focus in from an agile delivery perspective. How does that look from an architecture perspective here within ServiceNow? So this kind of gives you a view of looking at that from that architecture view. So you still might do the combination of top-down strategic planning here, which would then add those projects here once they get prioritized and approved, and then you'd be able to track and manage and report on status of those projects. At the same time, the agile teams then can create their backlog for the project. They can manage their sprints here. That information can flow in and view that information here into the project. So the project manager or scrum master can view that there from a standard PPM perspective, do that standard status reporting, but yet still allow the team to use that agile framework. So that's one example when we look at it from an overall architecture perspective. But we're seeing more and more of the hybrid delivery. Another example here, and this is looking specifically down into project execution. You can see here along the top, we've got the standard kind of waterfall phases associated with the project. You still might have some potential stage gates, but then up front here is part of that initialization of the project. Might do some epic agile planning, can create your overall backlog. As you can see here, that can then be done and plan those sprints, execute those sprints to deliver those capabilities, i.e. those epics. But at the same time, doing it within under the umbrella, if you will, of managing a standard waterfall type project. So we're seeing those very common. What you can do with those two, right? You can manage all of this directly on the platform, or you could integrate it in with one of your agile tools as appropriate. So just wanted to highlight those as kind of what we're seeing as common trends is organizations focusing in on hybrid project delivery. Now, when we look at enterprise agile planning, definitely seeing more and more uptake here in enterprise agile planning. And a lot of times we're seeing this kind of in pockets of an organization. Unless you're a 100% organization that's solely managed from a pure scaled agile framework or from a pure DevOps perspective, you can use this type of framework, but typically we still see the hybrid. This can be a way to manage those agile activities with the different agile teams. What's nice here with the new enterprise agile planning, which you're seeing an example here. Number one, it's actually part of the strategic planning workspace. So just as an FYI, that requires the SPM Pro. Also here, there are 4 predefined agile structures that you can use. Also, you can basically configure your specific agile structure. So if you're doing a variation of the traditional Scrum, but you want to do some of the program increments and some of the components of SAFe, but not everything, so you can look at kind of configuring your own framework that you want to use for your agile development teams. An example here is kind of highlighting those out of the box, if you will, agile frameworks. So there's the essential framework. There's the full configuration, large solution, portfolio configuration. And you'll see with each one of those, you got a hierarchy. So what are the different items that you'll be managing in that framework? So starting over here with essential, with managing an agile release train with epics, and then the team level will be down and managing the stories. And you can see over here for full, we're starting off with a SAFe portfolio in here. Then we've got our solution train, our agile release trains here, and then down to the team level. You can also see here, you can come over and create a new configuration. So if there's a different framework that you need to establish for your organization or for some of your teams, you can configure your own Agile framework to assist with enterprise Agile planning. So that's kind of a brief introduction there with the new capabilities here for enterprise Agile planning. Next, we wanted to talk about some of the strategic planning updates as well as some best practices. And a lot of the updates here are focused around prioritization and help you to make those prioritization decisions. So one thing before we jump into that, I kind of like to use this as an anchor slide. In strategic planning, whether it being from an enterprise Agile perspective we just mentioned, or the traditional planning, typically going to start off with strategy. We're going to manage our overall goals, and then we're going to create our overall backlog. And we'll see that here. And this is regardless of whether we're doing that from a enterprise Agile perspective or we're doing a traditional. And we're really trying to get alignment to goals and objectives. We're really trying to prioritize and ultimately want to then basically approve those items to move into execution. So that's kind of the focus here for Strategic Planning Workspace, is to help support the strategy portion, the alignment, prioritization portion, and then the execution would be in your traditional, what you're using today to manage project via the project workspace. Next here, what we like to highlight here is what we see as a common governance model that we see with many of our organizations. Some of the best practices that we've seen here. A lot of what we're going to focus on here for this section is around the strategic planning. And so what we're seeing, as I mentioned earlier, is many organizations, even outside of IT, if they have that strategic planning group, they start using and adopting the strategic planning workspace. And they could do that in isolation. So they could just be managing that, creating their strategic plans, creating their roadmaps. They wouldn't flow into the execution module. So that's one option, or they could flow into the execution module, but it allows for them to set the direction, set their goals, and set the high level initiatives that they want to establish for the organization. In terms of what we see for the overall strategic planning process, in a purist form, starting over here with your strategic plans, creating your actual strategic priorities, then within those priorities, creating your various organizational goals. You might have sub goals associated with that. And then what are the targets, meaning the metrics or the performance measures you want to accomplish with each one of those goals. And you can kind of set that up overall for the organization. The organization could then share that with the different business units. They can then take that and create their associated plans in each business unit. So once we've created and established the goals, then that strategic planning group can then go create the strategic planning items. Here again, this might be a process you want to potentially adopt for your annual planning or your quarterly planning. And then from there, you can prioritize and rank those planning items in the strategic planning workspace. And then at that point, right, we would create our overall strategic roadmap for all those prioritized items. Then you could present the roadmap to the steering committee following that governance model we showed earlier, and then you could get their approval. Once you get their approval, then you can begin the execution if that's in your process, or maybe you need to go into more detailed business case planning, but kind of gives you a high level view of the strategic planning process. We see how it aligns with the ServiceNow solution. One of the new areas for this release is in scoring, and there's various scoring frameworks that you can use. So one being RICE, one being value versus effort, and we'll highlight those different options going forward. But what we see here is we're looking at from a RICE perspective, what's the reach? So what's the impact? How many customers or how many parts of the organization, meaning number of employees, how many individuals are we going to impact with this? We can then look at overall impact from a scale from 1 to 5. We can look at a confidence level here. We can look at effort associated with this. It's really high level, right? So kind of small, medium, large, kind of t-shirt ties type of effort here. And then the system will automatically then create a RICE score. You can then use that to determine how you want to finally prioritize items. So typically that's an input. That's why we show it here. Then you'd want to kind of analyze that across your different initiatives. Use the recently released Moscow to really denote the importance. We all know that there's regulatory changes in different industries, so that could highlight those must-have items that need to be implemented, and you could contrast that against your RISE scoring. Also, then make sure you got your strategic alignment with your goals, alignment with the core capabilities of an organization, do your kind of detailed cost value analysis. At that point, then you can actually prioritize and rank. And so it's nice that you can actually have the system auto rank it for you based upon an attribute, or you can manually rank those from 1 to N. So great ability there to help you with prioritization. Also, you can kind of create your own prioritization framework. So the system allows you to do that as well. The next here, just kind of highlighting that typically you're going to do strategic planning, right? And that's going to come into that process we just mentioned. A lot of times you're still going to have to do your operational planning here, and then they'll have that convergence here across your strategic and operational plans. So that's of interest, or you have questions on that, that's something we can follow up and discuss best practices there and how to manage both of those intakes as part of that annual quarterly planning. Next, I want to just kind of break it down a little bit here when we look at the strategic planning process in ServiceNow. The reason I'm adding this in today is just we get a lot of questions about this. We see a lot of organizations that haven't been doing kind of more structured strategic planning, but we have definitely in healthcare, most on the business side, they have a strategic planning organization, and they do this on an ongoing basis. So if we look at it here, we kind of see the top-down strategic planning and bottom-up. So strategic planning workspace would be the top-down. That's where you can create your strategic plan, your priorities, and your goals. You can do that enterprise-wide, such as the organization. Then each business unit could take from that and create their own plans and goals, right? And then from there, you can create and manage your portfolios. So you can define those portfolios, which are a container of your different demands and projects or epics. And you can then manage those, create an overall roadmap once you've had a chance to prioritize them. One thing you can also do, as I mentioned earlier, the strategic plan can be done in isolation, or once these are created, you can decide when that actually creates the core demands or projects for execution. So you can determine how you want that to function. And when is the right time? Is it after they're prioritized? Is it after they're approved in terms of strategic planning? And then there's bottom up. Many of you probably prior to using Strategic Planning Workspace were following the best practice around bottom up, where you're allowing the organization to submit their project ideas via the service portal. They're submitting those ideas. Those get assessed. Then they go through a governance process. So you can continue to do that process. And then you would create projects from that. But also you can basically consolidate this bottom-up planning and have it then viewed in strategic planning. So you can start looking at dependencies. You can have an overall integrated roadmap. So you can kind of decide how you want that integration to be set up and the timing at which you see that consolidation. So that kind of gives you a high-level view of the overall process. Here, I'm not going to spend too much time here, but if we were just break it down and look at your strategic goal planning process, right? You create your strategic plan as well as your overall priorities, as well as then your goals and targets. Same thing, you'd break that down by each business unit, and that would be the top-down strategic planning. If you're doing it more from a portfolio product perspective, right, you could obviously come in and create different goals and or plans, if you will, at those levels and manage those goals as well. So depending upon, right, if you're still more project-centric or if you're moving more towards product-centric. And then from a strategic road mapping perspective, right, that's just part of the maturity process or the overall life cycle. Once you've been able to have your goals, once you've been able to identify your initiatives, then from there, you want to assess those, prioritize them. At that point, then create your overall roadmap. And so you can do that here in the strategic planning workspace. Here is that top-down strategic road mapping activities. Then the bottom up, as we mentioned before, right? And you can have those roll up into an overall roadmap. So there's a lot of things you can do around that roadmap and a lot of dependencies that you can manage. So it becomes very powerful there to look at your roadmap from an ongoing execution perspective, but still allowing your team to execute in their traditional projects. So one of the enhancements here for the Washington, D.C. release is really allowing for these different, I would say, scoring frameworks. And you'll see here you have this new scoring capability here in the Strategic Planning Workspace. In this example here, we've selected the RICE method. So we look at all the different dimensions here from a reach perspective. So how many people or customers is this going to reach? What's the overall impact of this change upon the organization? What's the confidence level that we'll be able to implement this? And a t-shirt sizing in terms of level of effort. And that's going to calculate an overall RICE score, which you can then factor in against your Moscow ratings here in terms of which ones are must-haves or should-haves to really help you with your overall planning and help you with looking at things from a ranking perspective. A nice additional feature here is being able to do a filtering here. So if you wanted to filter out and only look at demands, because maybe you're just doing your planning for new work coming in, so we could come in here and just look at demands, look at their overall scoring, look at the Moscow rating associated with those to help with prioritization. So a great way to kind of slice and dice the information here by using the new filter capability. And one of the other things here in the strategic planning workspace, so if we come in here and we look at into a project as an example, we can then start to see the project financials, basically similar to what you were seeing in the core project management capabilities previously. So you can see all the summary information. You can see the detailed listing here of all your different cost plans are in here, so you can get that visibility here down at the say the project level, the demand level. And also here you can actually then export those costs or baselines to Excel or CSV. So some new capabilities here for those organizations that are focused more heavily in the financial side. This financial summary view is also available, which we'll highlight as part of the project workspace as well. Next, just to highlight some of the resource management capabilities. One thing I'd like to highlight here from a resource management governance model perspective for ultimate success in our experience in implementing resource management and helping organizations with that change curve and that adoption is making sure that there's a resource management governance model. You don't necessarily need to have a separate governance model, but if you don't include resource management as a core function into your overall strategic governance and approval, then you definitely need to have a mechanism to take that approved strategic plan and then look at it from an overall resource perspective with all the different resource managers to make sure that you can initiate the projects on time and or need to change the schedule based upon your resource capacity. So being able to manage and have an overall governance model and resource management is key to success by looking at resource management. So one of the things here they've done in the last couple releases, and I think one of the point releases here is a resource management workspace. So this is definitely a workspace they're continuing to update here over the upcoming releases. So as you can see here, we can start to get a heat map now of resources, and we can see their overall heat map based upon their current project assignments, whether or not they have additional or available capacity, or if they're going to be over allocated. So you can see that there might be some issues there. This is primarily here currently focused on organizations are using the resource assignment capabilities and looking at things from a task perspective. So that's the primary kind of use cases here for the resource management workspace. Ultimately, I see this replacing the resource allocation workbench, where some of the customers have been using that for their resource management. In terms of project workspace enhancements. One of the key ones here with the new project workspace is the ability to kind of view the details. And so now they've added in the details page here. As we all know, in the classic view here, we had the details, and that's where you could kind of manage the project through the project phases. That's where you could potentially put some governance in there. But now you can get access to the project details here, all in the new workspace. And so I'm assuming this is part of their process to get everything kind of migrated over to the new workspace. A few more items that they'll need to migrate over, but this is a step in that direction. I would say too that if you have a lot of configurations in some of your existing, classic view, if you will, you'd want to look at that and determine if you want to make some updates here into the new workspace view. So that would have to be updated there. So you want to try to keep that more out of the box as possible. But I'm sure there's always the need for a few attributes here that you might need to update. So just as an FYI, this is going to be based on box setup versus your current class of view might be where you've configured that with additional attributes. So next here, before I go to analytics here, I'll have a couple minutes here that I can show some things here in the system. So let me do that here. So you have this new scoring tab here. This is where you get to use your selected scoring framework here. So as we go through that process here, I can say the reach, meaning the coverage of number of customers or number of employees. Here we can kind of assess the overall impact associated with it. What's our confidence level with this initiative here? So we could say be very high. Then we can come in here and look at the effort from a t-shirt sizing perspective, and then it's going to calculate an overall RICE score for us, and it's using that the RICE scoring framework. So we can see that here. So you can use that to help with your overall scoring. As we've shown there in the slide, you could look at filtering this down further, right? So if you wanted to filter this down and look at all of your, say, for example, if you wanted to look at all your must-haves, you could come down and filter that further. So it gives you ability here to manage that here from an overall scoring perspective. So that's one of the highlights here in the strategic planning workspace. And then here, if we come in to just kind of look at one of the other views here. So we can now come in here and look at a particular view here, looking at, in this case, I think we're looking at a demand or project here. So we can see some of the views here associated with the project. Here's the enterprise agile planning that I mentioned previously. Here again, this is based upon the overall enterprise planning framework that you want to establish, either using out of the box or looking at configuring your own. And then over here, we're looking at it from an overall planning board perspective. Do I want to see some of the dependencies, right? So I can have that displayed as well if you have those in the data. Also, just as a kind of an example here, you can really kind of configure how you want your enterprise agile planning to be set up. So we can see here the different configurations here, the overall structure here associated with it. So gives you that flexibility here to create your own configuration versus using the out-of-the-box configurations. So those are the key highlights here from a strategic planning workspace perspective. Next here, if we look at things from that project workspace that we were looking at previously here. So now I've got, the planning, which you've probably been using previously. Now you've got the details capability, which I mentioned earlier, is pulling those out of the box fields here that are showing in here in terms of your project details. So you can view that information here. If you want to look at the financials information, we can look at the financial information here. In this case, I don't have any cost plan information in here yet, So I can look at that financial information. And as we might have, or excuse me, you might have been using the system before. So now you've got your risks and issues here all in one place. So you can manage them all here. You can create them all here. You can use the overall process flow, right? So if I want to convert this or associate it or delete it, so a lot of ease of use here to this, right? I can also just make updates here in line editing as well. And then I really like the processing it through the RIDAC process here. So I'm going to convert this risk here to an issue. I can decide to close the risk if appropriate and say we have a new issue with project resources here, and I can say, okay, I can close the risk, and we can click OK. So it's now going to convert that. We now here have that new issue here that's being displayed. We can now see that here in the system. So that's just some of the other newer capabilities. Here again, you can toggle over here to the classic view as well. And then the last thing to highlight here and the major updates and highlights here is looking at it from a resource management workspace perspective. And so if I come in here and look at the analyst view here, I've got one resource in here. I can see the project that he's been allocated to. I can see that he definitely has additional capacity here. If I wanted to see if he has any unassigned tasks here, so I could look at those and do that those task assignment resource allocations to the resource as well. So give a good view here in terms of the resource management workspace. These cards are similar to those of you that have used the resource allocation workbench previously. It's called a card in this case here. So I can just say I have a new resource group card as an example. Just follow it through the process here. Users active is true, and right here I can select an overall resource group as an example, and I can come in here and select a group here and click confirm. So based on what I have in there, based on my associated data, I would then see all my resources showing up here that have been allocated here. Then I would see any of my unassigned tasks. So easy process here, similar to what some of you might have been using in the resource allocation workbench. So what I would like to do next here is highlight some of our stakeholder analytics, and typically calling it stakeholder analytics here, because it's one of the key differentiators of our solution here, is that many organizations have been asking us, is there a way that they can provide visibility to all their stakeholders, regardless of whether or not they have an actual license in ServiceNow? And so we've created these service portals. So just think with your current service portal, you can give access to anyone in the organization. They can log in there, they can submit a request, or they can see status of the requests. So we're using that utility here, and we've got some pre-configured solutions. So this is kind of the enterprise portfolio view with multiple filters. So we see many CIOs using this, COOs using it, VPs and directors, giving that full visibility, also sharing it with the different business unit leaders and giving them that full visibility. It's amazing how that helps improve decision making. So that key thing is allowing everyone, all stakeholders, to view it, then easily being able to view your different roadmaps here, be able to one click into a business case, project charter, project status, export this to PDF or to PowerPoint. So some key capabilities here that customers love here with our pre-configured solution. Here again, we can obviously do custom. We obviously do a lot of tailoring when we implement these, but they can be installed as pre-configured. So here's a larger example of that. So sometimes organizations want to look at different report widgets on top and might want different attributes below. Here's an example of a business case. So I have a common, consistent business case. We've seen that very effective as organizations are going through the governance process and they're assessing these ones, and they want to look at all the additional details, and they're sharing that with all the executives. they can have that visibility and drill in and show that consistent layout to help with that decision making. From a project status report perspective, we have multiple status report templates, one pagers and two pagers here, but you'll have that consistent look and feel, and it rewards the PMs from putting in their status reports. All the stakeholders, one click away, they can view that all within that portal where everyone has access. And same thing here from a project charter. So if you wanted to have a project charter, it's probably more for traditional based organizations versus the hybrid or agile. We do see it for some hybrid organizations as well. And here's an example of one of the status reports, kind of the one-page status report. Definitely have two-page versions. We also do these for programs or program status reports as an example. So those are also available. So next, I wanted to kind of highlight a little bit about some implementation best practices here. So with SPM, what we found over the years is that it's really key to focus on adoption and organizational change. And that starts first with planning. Let's plan for that change. Let's plan for a capability roadmap that we're going to implement over time. Let's don't try to do everything at once because it is a large change effort. And so making sure it is a phased overall deployment. And then always we keep our eye on what are the results and outcomes we want to accomplish with each phase. And that's going to then drive ultimate adoption as well. That's going to help us with resource utilization, ability to enhance our overall return on investment for our different project initiatives. So at a high level, we see this as a best practice upfront planning and road mapping by phase, planning for organizational change, and then doing each phase rollout. Also, right, it's important to focus on as much out of the box as you can in your first phase, right? And then you can mature over time. And you can think of doing that same thing when you look at it from strategic planning or resource management, kind of do that phased implementation approach. Also, what we found in terms of critical success factors, really focusing in here on keeping it simple, don't over automate, but at the same time, we need to confirm what are the outcomes we want to achieve with each phase so we can tie back to those. But I couldn't say more, don't over automate. Easy to do, but really focused on that out of the box simplification as much as possible. Number 3, number 4 are critical. If I were to say to do one thing to help out with adoption for SPM or PPM implementations, is giving that full stakeholder analytic visibility that we showed earlier. If you can do that and executives are using it and they're using it in their various governance reviews, that's going to make sure that the organization adopts and is using the tool. I've seen that myself personally, where we went through that process and we said, okay, we've got the executives on board. We're going to use one tool. We're going to have full visibility. And so this is when we're going to start using the tool as part of our governance and steering committees, et cetera. And so we didn't really have full adoption, but within the day before, 2 or 3 hours before those executive meetings, everything was up to date. Everyone recognizing that executives are going to view that information to make decisions. And there's that ongoing constant reinforcement that the data needs to be in the system for us to make decisions on. And that really helps with your adoption. So if you're struggling with adoption, and if you just want to narrow it down into one item, that would be the key item to focus on. Yes, 5 and 6 are vitally important. Training communications, having those role-based forums as initial rollout, kind of change champion forums, and then those can also then turn into continuous improvement. And then that number 6, that reinforcement, as we mentioned earlier, sponsorship's great, but leadership reinforcement, they're using the system or their direct reports are using the system to make decisions. Executives, CIOs are coming in and using the data. We have multiple examples where the CIOs are going in to the stakeholder analytics pages I was showing earlier. They do that every morning. They come in and see, okay, what are the new requests that have come in? What are our current estimates? What's the current status of our in-flight work? They use that then in their conversations with the different business units throughout the day. And that really then rewards the organization for putting the data in. And, couldn't spend more time here. Definitely could. We could spend, days here talking about organizational change. But as I mentioned, that one key thing you can do is focusing in on the visibility. But you definitely need to understand your key stakeholders. You need to understand where they're at today, how you educate them, how do you get their commitment. And I definitely agree, if possible, to do a pilot approach as you're rolling it out. So you can pilot this approach out with different groups. Or you just do it by phase, like we mentioned before, a very small set of capabilities you do initially, and then phase it in over time. Sure. Yeah, so depending on where your biggest value opportunities are, maybe your largest pain points, if you're looking for strategic planning and prioritization, we try to highlight some best practices there. We can help you, guide you, get some education how you might want to best use that. If you're looking at enterprise agile planning, the setup and usage, if you're looking hybrid project portfolio management, definitely we can assist you with implementation services, advisory, roadmap services for that. Obviously, the stakeholder analytics and reporting that we talked about. These are really kind of our core bread and butter services. The analytics reporting solutions we've had pre-built or custom, implementation roadmap and advisory, implementations themselves, as well as ongoing advisory and support. So customers really value those service offerings. So in terms of your next steps, feel free if you want to reach out and we could do a health check on where you currently are with SPM, and we could actually potentially even give you a high-level roadmap. You can schedule a demo of our analytics, so you can look at the portfolio analytics based on questions earlier, some of our other balanced scorecard type analytics that are linked into the strategic plan. That was a good schedule, an opportunity to discuss implementation, as well as some of our upcoming training sessions. So multiple opportunities for you to make sure you can get value out of your investments around SPM. And just like to end by thanking everyone for attending our session today. Feel free to follow up if you have any questions, need any more information.